Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at literal and implied meaning, and hopefully we can determine the difference between those. So we'll quickly look at our learning goal and our success criteria for this unit. So our learning goal is, and I'll get my highlighter out, students will understand how to determine literal and implied meaning. Okay, you need to be able to determine that, and you've got to be able to find it within some text. So you also need to understand how these authors use it to influence the reader. Okay, so with our success criteria, I'll move my beautiful mug over to this side. So success criteria is that you can define, so it means being able to explain what it means. You need literal meaning, and also the same for implied meaning, and you can locate these within a text. So you need to be able to find it within a text and show that you can do that. And also finally, you need to be able to, you're not just going to be reading it, you've got to be able to create it as well. So make sure that you're creating or you're using literal and implied meaning when you're within a text. Alright, so let's look at the definitions. So I've used good old Google Docs Google definition here, and we've got the meanings of these two words. So literal basically means that you're taking words in their usual or most basic sense without metaphor or exaggeration. Where the example here is that dreadful in its literal sense means full of dread. So when we say things like this sandwich is dreadful, the literal meaning, and taking that literally, would be that that sandwich is full of dread, which doesn't really make sense. So we need to use our implied meaning, and we need to understand the difference between the two of these. So implied meanings gives us that suggested but not directly expressed. Okay, so the way I like to refer to these, and you've probably heard me say this a lot, is that implied is you got to show your show, where your literal is your tell. Okay, if something's dreadful, show me what it means. What does dreadful mean? Okay, is it another example could be if someone's anxious, show me what anxious means by using the different words. They're shaking, you can see them moving like that. That's what showing means. Where telling is obviously saying this person is anxious or nervous. So making sure we understand the difference between those. So we're doing a quick example here. I'm going to read this text, and there's some questions to help us identify these. So we'll be able to identify the literal and implied meaning within this. The umpire blew his whistle and the game commenced. Rain fell on the 36 men who struggled against the icy conditions to try to get the ball through the goals. It was going to be a grueling 4 quarters for them, but for me, I couldn't wait, nor could the near 100,000 strong fans who could hardly keep their seats on this, the final day of the season. Where else would you be than Melbourne on a day like today? Okay, so this is a good example of implied meaning, and I'm going to ask you this first question, and I'll go through and I'll show you how I identify these answers. What game are they playing? Okay, so they're not directly telling us what game they're playing. They're showing us, they're using implied meaning, and we need to be able to identify that and get that out. So we're going to try and see if we can highlight some evidence within this to see if we can determine what game they're playing. And obviously they start off with, they've got an umpire who blew the whistle. There are 36 men on there playing at the moment. Okay, and they have to try to get the ball through the goals. And finally they're playing 4 quarters. So already we can eliminate some of the games that they're playing in here. So it's obviously not going to be football, rugby league, or rugby union, or tennis, or any of those other sports. There's an umpire, there's 36 men, so it's a big game. They're trying to get the ball through the goals, and there's 4 quarters. So the implied meaning of this is that they are playing AFL. Okay, the literal meaning would be they'd say playing AFL, but we've used the implied meaning and our understanding of the text to get out what the actual implied meaning is. Now, second question here is what season is it in? And I'll highlight here in blue. They've just 2 key points here. They've said the rain is falling, and they've struggled against the icy conditions. So obviously already we can eliminate summer. It's icy, it's raining, so I feel this is being played in winter. And what match is it? So by that I mean, what match is it in the regards to the season? And I highlighted this point down here. It's the final day of the season. So the implied meaning in this example is that it's the grand final. Okay, there's some other keys in there that tell us that it's the grand final. It's obviously a big game. There's 100,000 people there. It's played in Melbourne. We know that the AFL Grand Final is played in Melbourne. So we've got to start to get these implied meanings out. Now, this final question here has a good understanding of what implied and literal meaning means. So if we took this literally, fans who could hardly keep their seats. I'm going to draw a little example here. Fans who could hardly keep their seats. I've got, okay, again, this is probably one of the best drawings you have ever seen in your life. And no, I didn't get it from Google Images. That's just my awesome drawing. So here I have a fan, and it is struggling to hold a seat. Okay, that's the literal meaning of that statement. But we know that that's not the case. We know that there's a lot of expressions that we need to try and find out what the implied meaning on. So when we read through this, fans could hardly keep their seats. In the context of this, we know that this just means that they're all sort of excited, they're anxious. Okay, they can't even sit in their seats for the game, they're so excited. That's a perfect example of literal and implied meaning, and we need to be able to make sure that we can separate those. So finally, we've got our last task here, and I'll get you to, I'll move my head out of the way. I want you to fill this in. So it's got the expression, it's got what the literal meaning of that is if you took that literally, and then what the implied or intended meaning is. So for example, the first one here says she's got a few kangaroos loose in the top paddock. So if we took that literally, that would mean that there are wild kangaroos hopping around, or they've escaped somewhere in a paddock that's on the top of the hill. But the intended meaning is basically what we know that means, that she's a little weird. Okay, so we'll say, I'll just write weird just due to space. Okay, that's what the intended meaning of that statement is. So if you screenshot this right now and you put these into your book, we'll look at these tomorrow and we'll see if we can get the same intended or literal meanings. So that's what we mean by literal and implied meanings.